Hello, my name's Liz, and in this lesson I would like to show you how to prepare for your IELTS test. There are many steps that you need to take if you're going to be successful in your IELTS test. And in this lesson I'm going to talk you through the 15 most important steps that you must complete if you're going to do well in your test. Now let's start with the first one and the most obvious. And that is to learn about the test. Of course, you shouldn't enter the examination room until you know as much as you can about the test. You need to learn about the content, the 4 different tests: listening, reading, writing and speaking. And you need to learn the format of each of those tests. You need to know what is going to happen when you get in the test, what the test is all about, what problems you might have. Now, recently a student contacted me because he went into the listening test and was very upset to find the recording was played only once. Well, of course the recording is played only once. That is part of the IELTS listening test. Now, all this information should not be a surprise to you. It is all available online. And you need to read as much as you can so that you know exactly what will happen when you take your test. Now, at the end of the lesson, I will give you links so that you can learn as much as you can about IELTS. And of course, when you're learning about IELTS, you also need to look at the timing. If you're doing, for example, the reading and the writing, then the timing is very much in your hands. That means that you're given an hour to accomplish a certain number of tasks or passages, and it's your choice how to manage your time. So understanding the timing is very important. And of course, scoring. You need to know how your band score is assessed. Now, for listening and reading, it's very easy because you get points for every correct answer. For speaking and writing, it's different because an examiner will assess you. And the more you understand about the way you are assessed, the better your results will be. So I will give you links for that as well later on. Now, FAQ means frequently asked questions. The more you learn about the test, often you start having more questions. Now, if you look at the answers to frequently asked questions, you will learn a lot about IELTS. So I'll give you links to frequently asked questions about each skill in the IELTS test. Now, moving on, step number 2. Once you understand what IELTS is, it's time to look at the different IELTS tests. There are 2 IELTS tests. There's the academic test and the general training test. Now, for listening and speaking, there's only 1 test. But for writing and reading, you need to choose. And it's very important that you know exactly which one you're going to do before you start preparing. The academic test is mostly for university entrance, and the general training test is if you're moving abroad. So make sure you know which test you're going to take, and you make sure you prepare properly for that. Again, I will give you links at the end of the lesson. Now, let's move on to step number 3, and I think this is one of the most important steps that you can take, and that is about being realistic with your goals. You need to have a fixed aim for IELTS. What band score are you aiming for? But you need to be realistic. So let me explain a little bit more about this. So, being realistic. Now, of course, number 1, decide what band score you're aiming for. Are you aiming for 6.5, 7, 7.5? Be very clear about the band score you really need. And then have the level of your English checked. Now, this is very important to do. If the level of your English does not match the band score that you want, then you're going to have problems. If the level of your English is much lower than the band score you want, it's going to be almost impossible to reach that band score if you only study IELTS skills. You need to make sure that the level of your English is equal to the band score that you're aiming for. Now, I have a lot of students asking me, why can't they get band score 7? They've taken the test 5 times, but still can't get 7. And what tips can I give them? Well, there's one tip. Get your English checked. If your English is too low, you're not going to get 7. So to get the band score you want, you need to have the right level of English. So once you know your level of English, then you can make a plan. And you either have to study English first to bring your level of English up to the right level, or if your English level is already at the right level, then you can just study your IELTS skills, which basically means the skills for doing the exam. Or maybe your English is just a little bit below the appropriate level for your band score, and so maybe you want to study English and IELTS together. So this is very important about being realistic. What band score can you realistically get with your level of English? And of course, that comes to the next point, which is having a time frame. This is all again about being realistic. How much time will it take you to make sure your English is at the right level for the band score that you want? And how long will it take you to learn your IELTS skills? I have many students asking me about how long it will take. It is an impossible question to ask without meeting the student. Some students can learn exam skills very quickly, and I have known students to prepare for their IELTS test in 2 weeks and get the band score they want. Other students cannot understand the skills very well and they have problems with it, and their level of English is not very strong. So that means that their time frame is going to be much wider, and so it could take them months. So it really depends on the speed of your learning and on the level of your English. So just make sure that you do have a realistic time frame and that you have enough time to actually get ready for your IELTS test. So very important. Now let's have a look at the next one. Another very important step. Once you have decided your band score and you know the level of your English and you've already decided how you're going to study for IELTS, you're going to do English or IELTS and English, then you need to look more deeply at the band score that you've chosen. You need to know the requirements of that band score. Now, as I said earlier, listening and reading, it's very easy. It's a point system. But for speaking and writing, this is quite different. For speaking and writing, the examiner is looking for specific things in your language and in your skills. And you need to know exactly what the examiner is looking for the band score that you want. And when you understand more about the band score, then you will start improving. So I'll give you links again at the end of the lesson to help you understand about the band scores for speaking and writing. Let's move on to the next step. Step number 5. That is learning about the question types. Now, it's very important that you do this. For listening and reading in IELTS, there are over 10 different types of questions that you can get in the test. That's a lot. Now, in the test, you don't have time to look at a question and try to understand what you need to do. It's very important that you know the types of questions before you enter the exam room. And for step number 6, it's very important that you did develop the tips and techniques to deal with each type of question. So that's very important. And of course, it's not just for listening and reading. Also for writing task 2 for your essay, you're going to have to look at the different essay questions that you get. There are different types and you have to prepare them. I remember once I had a student who asked me to take a look at their writing. So I said yes, and they sent me a sample essay. But the essay question wasn't an IELTS essay question. So it was a complete waste of time. IELTS have specific essay questions, and you need to know what they are. Don't waste your time learning from any essay question. There's a lot of information on the internet and it can be confusing. So it's very important that you do learn the right types of questions for these essays in IELTS. And of course, that's the same for speaking. You're also going to have a range of questions, and it's important that you know what types of questions the examiner will ask you and how to deal with them successfully. And for writing task 1, for the general training, you'll have a letter, and there are different types of letters. For the academic task 1, it's a chart, and there are about 6 different charts that you can get. So you really need to look at each question type. You've got to develop tips and techniques so that you can deal with them successfully in the test. Now let's have a look at step 7. Step 7 is all about topics. There are common topics that come in IELTS and you need to prepare them. You need to prepare vocabulary to be able to talk about these topics. Now, even if the level of your English is at the right level for the band score you want, you still should prepare the common topics and vocabulary. Now, this is particularly important in speaking because you need to give your answer directly. All the vocabulary needs to be on the tip of your tongue, which means ready to use, without hesitation. So preparing all these topics and vocabulary is essential. The next point is to develop your ideas. Ideas and topics again. And you can do this from a variety of sources. It's very important, if you have time for your IELTS preparation, to have a look at documentaries. Take a look at the BBC and look at some new world issues. Have a look at The New Scientist and other interesting magazines that cover a range of topics. Listen to radio programmes. All of this will help you develop the right English, and it will help you for listening, reading, writing and speaking. So that's very important. Now, at the end of the lesson, I will give you a link to useful websites, and that will include where to find these sources. Now, if you don't have much time before your test, if you only have a couple of weeks, you probably don't have time to do that. But if you do have time, it is an excellent way of preparing. Now, another thing that students ask me is, should they only listen to documentaries and radio programmes that have British English and Australian English? Well, the answer is no, because IELTS is an international English language test. So that means you can have a variety of accents in your listening test. And even the examiners might have different accents. They will not all be British or Australian. So listening to documentaries and BBC News and radio is very important. Now let's move on to step number 9. Number 9, you need to do practice tests to assess your listening and reading. Now you can do that very easily because you can check how many points you got right and what band score you've got. So you will know exactly what band score you are looking at for listening and reading, and you can do that at home. Now this is Cambridge IELTS 9. Now there are many practice tests on the internet, and also there are many books with IELTS practice tests, but these are the only books that are real IELTS exams. These are books from 1 to 9. This is book 9. These books were published by IELTS, and they contain a sample of old IELTS exam papers. There are 4 tests in each book, and you need to get them if you want to check your band score. Of course, the other books are useful for practice, but these are the real exam papers, so please use them. Now let's have a look at step 10. For the next step, you need to take a look at getting your speaking and writing assessed. Now, the listening and reading is very easy because you can do practice tests and calculate your own score. But for speaking and writing, it's very difficult to assess your own level. So you need to find an experienced IELTS teacher. If you can find an examiner or an ex-examiner, that's the best, obviously, because they can give you more accurate feedback. But if you can't, then at least try to find an experienced IELTS teacher. And when you get your speaking and writing assessed, don't just find out what band score you got. Try to find out where your weaknesses are. And also how they assess your band score as well. Which are the points that are stronger or weaker. Number 11 is obviously to plan your development and practice. Now, a lot of students ask me for a schedule for studying IELTS. Well, it's almost impossible to give a schedule. Number one, students have different strengths and different weaknesses, and they have different amounts of time available. The most important thing is that you do cover all aspects of the test before your exam. So as long as you're getting all those question types prepared and you know exactly what's going to happen, you've prepared your common topics, vocabulary and ideas, then really that's the most that you can do in a short time for your schedule. But if you have more time available, then of course what you can do is actually plan more development. And that means looking at question types that are more difficult and improving your technique. So that can be organised by you the moment you know where your weaknesses are. So develop and practice. Number 12, and this is very important. This is for reading and writing. During your preparation for IELTS, you will need to spend some time building speed. Now, reading and writing have a very fixed time limit, and it can be very difficult for students to actually finish all 40 questions in 1 hour, or to write task 1 and task 2 in 1 hour. So building speed and learning to manage your own time is very important, and you should be practicing doing that at home, checking how long it takes you to write or how long it takes you to skim read a passage or to scan and find answers. So building speed, very important if you want to do well. So number 13, and that is to do a full practice test under exam conditions. Now, it's not the same as this. A lot of students use practice tests in order to just practice their skills or to find their band score, but they don't actually do the full test under exam conditions. So that means to do your listening, your reading and your writing all together, it will take you 2 hours and 40 minutes. During that time you will have no breaks. And this will really give you an idea of how difficult and tiring the IELTS exam can be. So this is a very important part of your preparation. You should at least do 1 practice test under exam conditions before you do your real test. I had a student recently who told me that one of the problems was he actually needed the toilet during the test, and the toilet was quite far down the corridor. So he lost a lot of time going to the toilet and coming back, and he didn't quite finish all the reading questions. So it's all these small details that you will understand when you start practicing under exam conditions. So please make sure you do that. You can do it at home. You don't have to pay to go into a practice test in a school. You can sit at home, set your alarm clock and do listening, reading and writing in 2 hours and 40 minutes. Right, let's move on to the last 2 steps in your IELTS preparation. Step 14, of course, is to get training if you can. Now, obviously, professional training is the best, so if you can find a very good IELTS school, that is the place to go. You've got the British Council, you've got IDP, both very good, or you might just find a local school. But the most important thing is you choose a school that really does know about IELTS and can support you and understand your aims for IELTS. Don't just choose any school which claims to be the best. Make sure you choose wisely. And of course, if you can't afford to go to an IELTS school, you can always look online for free training. Of course, you can go and visit my website, www.ieltsliz.com, and there's plenty of free materials, advice, tips, and models so that you can get trained for free. So there's lots online as well. Now the last step, and again this is important, but unfortunately it's not possible for all students. Take your test when your English and IELTS skills are at their strongest. That's the time to take it. Not all students have this choice. Many students are under a deadline. But if you do have a chance, then take it at the right time. The time when you are scoring the band score that you want quite frequently. That's the time to take your test. Right, well that's the end of this lesson. Now let me give you plenty of links so that you can find the information that you need to prepare for IELTS.